LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the January 17th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out 35 of the weekend's best clips for what should be a really entertaining show for you all tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows on the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. This week we also have the return of the political comedy clips from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher and last night's Saturday Night Live. I'll actually start off with a Saturday Night Live clip in just a minute or two. You can look at all the topics I'm covering down in the video description. If you're watching this as a recorded show, I put time indexes down there so you can skip to the topics that most interest you. I've also put a link down in the video description to this clip list of the 35 clips I'm using in order with my sometimes cryptic notes. So if you want to follow along using the clip list and you can see what clips are coming up, it gives you an idea which network and what topic and which guest and kind of what they said, if you can decode what I said. And as I said, also the topics down there are listed, but they're generally, it's the 2016 presidential campaign is in high gear with Iowa coming up on February 1st. We just had a Republican debate earlier in the week, and I did a clip roundup on that. Right around the time I'm finishing the show tonight will be the Democratic debate, and if I think that there are good clips and the viewers think that I should do a clip roundup, you can let me know down in the comments section if you think I should do a Democratic debate clip roundup sometime tomorrow. If you think I should and I have the time, then I'll do that sometime Monday morning here California time. But now I want to get right to the topics here, the presidential campaign, and then there'll be a few clips on the Iran deal that went into effect and the release of the hostages, prisoners, whatever you want to call them. And then one clip at the end, Bill Maher was back. So, of course, the topic of how evil Islam is. And he talked specifically about the Syrian refugees who participated in these attacks on women in the city of Cologne in Germany. I'll be covering that at the end. But I'm going to start off with the Republican side of the 2016 presidential campaign, and I'm going to start my coverage of that with one of the funnier clips I thought from Saturday Night Live. Was the really, I think the most funny sketch on Saturday Night Live was the cold open where they parodied the Republican debate from earlier in the week that I also did my clip roundup of, and one of the first clip that I want to show from that debate is actually Darrell Hammond versus as Donald Trump versus Beck Bennett as Jeb Bush, and it shows just how Donald Trump dominated Jeb Bush, and I'll talk about that a little more after you watch that clip. Here.
Mr. Trump, we now turn to China.
Hold on, I'm getting a call from a respected expert. Hello? What? You're saying Jeb Bush is a little girl?
No, I'm not.
And he can't be president because his hand's bigger than his face?
Oh, that's not true. Look. Oh, dang it.
So, yeah, that was not the funniest part. I actually think the next Saturday Night Live clip I'm going to show in a minute is funnier than that one. But I wanted to start with that one because it showed, I think, how ineffectual Jeb Bush was. And one of the weird things about that is he had all this stuff supposedly ready to go at the debate that he didn't use, which was something that Chuck Todd brought up with him on NBC's Meet the Press this morning. And that's the next clip I want to show you, where Chuck Todd quotes to Jeb Bush all the stuff he was going to do to take on Donald Trump and didn't get around to over in this clip.
Something you said to Kathleen Parker 2 days before Thursday's debate. You said to her, I'm referring to Donald Trump, I'm going after him. The problem is there's too much low-hanging fruit. And then you go on to tick off that you're going to go after, highlight Trump's multiple bankruptcies, his company's massive layoffs, people, quote, getting stiffed, including a widow by the name of Vera Koking, whose house Trump attempted to replace in the mid-90s with a parking lot, referring to some eminent domain issues. It was pretty detailed game plan here. Governor, I don't remember hearing that on Thursday night. What happened?
Well, we talked about the 45% tariff that he has been advocating that would create a global depression and lay people off and create hardship. retaliated by the Chinese, and making sure that we couldn't sell our Boeing planes that are being made a mile away from where the debate took place. I had my chance, and I was the only person that goes after Trump on these issues. He's not a conservative. And should the opportunity come up in the next debate to talk about bankruptcies, I'll do it. 4 times he went bankrupt, and he claims, well, he was just using the law, but a lot of people got wiped out because of that. And the eminent domain issue is really a symbol of conservatism. Conservatives believe that we should use eminent domain for public use, not for private purpose.
You know, there's been an outside group, I believe it's Club for Growth, that has been hammering Donald Trump on this, I think on the airways in both Iowa and New Hampshire. None of this stuff sticks. How does this guy have Teflon? I mean, you've gone after him hard. I could argue that you've probably gone after him more than any other candidate on that stage. You're on the air with a TV ad hitting him. But he's got a Teflon about him. What do you make of it?
Well, there's a lot of anxiety. People are so angry with Washington and so frustrated about their own lives. I saw a survey that 63% of people can't afford a car repair of $500, and more than half of Americans have less than $1,000 of savings. And the big guy comes in and offers the moon and the stars, and people are latched onto that. But the reality is that he's not offering anything to lift people up. And I think the cumulative effect of pointing that out, respectfully, look, the guy's entertaining for sure, but his ideas aren't going to help people, and he doesn't have the skills to bring people together, and he has no proven leadership skills in the public domain. So my path is to say I do. I've got a proven record. I don't run away from the fire. I don't blame other people. I don't disparage people. I try to unite around a common purpose. I got to do that as governor, and the ideas that I'm laying out would help America, and that's my path.
You know, right when you announced in
So, yeah, that did not work very well for Jeb Bush in the last debate. And it's kind of a big admission for him. I think I heard one of the pundits say on NBC, Meet the Press later, that it's kind of a big admission that Jeb Bush called Donald Trump the big guy, because Jeb Bush, with all his super PAC money and his establishment connections, he was supposed to be the big guy, but turns out he's kind of almost a asterisk in the campaign unless he wages some really big comeback in the next few weeks. And the idea that he had like all these attacks on Donald Trump all ready to go and then somehow didn't quite get to go, that was also parodied right at the very beginning of this next Saturday Night Live clip, also from the cold open. You'll see Beck Bennett, just for a few seconds, doing the Jeb Bush character all ready to go, but then it's not his turn. It actually goes to Ted Cruz, played by Taran Killam, who does this pretty funny parody. One of the funnier jokes, I thought, from Saturday Night Live on the whole issue of New York values that Ted Cruz brought up at the last debate and before the last debate. And I'll talk about that a little more. If you see that clip here.
Question is for Jeb.
It is?
Wait, I'm sorry. No, I'm wrong. It says Ted Cruz. Mr. Cruz, you suggested Mr. Trump embodies New York values. Could you explain what you mean by that?
I think most people know exactly what New York values are. And frankly, they are not the rest of the country's values. Instead of celebrating Christmas, New Yorkers celebrate a pagan holiday called Festivus. Instead of watching American football, they challenge each other to masturbation contests. In New York, people don't say hi to their neighbors. They say, "Hello, Newman."
Sounds like you're describing the TV show Seinfeld. Is that what you mean by New York values?
Believe me, if I could say liberal Jews, I would.
And I think actually that's what New York values is supposed to mean, liberal Jewish values. And that's why I thought that was kind of a funny clip. And the whole Seinfeld thing is kind of a caricature of what people think New York values are. But it was a big topic in the debate, and it was also a topic over on Fox News Sunday this morning. The one show that Ted Cruz did an interview this morning was over on Fox News Sunday. You remember last week he did his first interview in quite a long time. I think it was over on Face the Nation. So here is Chris Wallace asking him about New York values and even bringing up the 9/11 thing that Donald Trump brought up. And, well, I'll discuss Ted Cruz's answer after you watch that clip here.
Real hits for your attack this week on Donald Trump and the so-called New York values. I happen to have. I don't know if you've had a chance to see them because they were on you've been on the campaign trail. Here is The New York Post, they say Cruz missiles, and they quote Rudy Giuliani as saying that he thought that New York had gotten over this, or rather the country had gotten over this kind of knee-jerk reaction against New York. They accuse you of a sneering apology. Here is the New York Daily News. Slime doesn't pay, Ted. Your reaction?
Well, look, these are certainly amusing, and it is amusing seeing the media lead in New York and D.C. Run around with their hair on fire at wondering what on earth are New York values. I'll tell you, in the rest of the country, people understand exactly what that is. In South Carolina, when I was there, the people there certainly understand it. And you know what is particularly...
Is responding to 9/11 part of New York values?
You know what is particularly curious, Chris? Is that formulation didn't come from me. It came from Donald Trump. Donald Trump, when he was being interviewed by Tim Russert, when he was explaining his views a number of years ago.
1999.
He explained that his views were that he was very pro-choice, he supported partial birth abortion, he was open to gay marriage, and his explanation for all of that, he said, I'm a New Yorker. I'm from Manhattan. Those are the views of New York. Those are what New York values are. They're not Iowa values, but that's New York values. And so that was Donald's own explanation of what New York values are. It's how he articulated it. And it strikes me as curious now that he is displaying such outrage that anyone would even acknowledge that there is a particular political view. And I would point out it's a view echoed by far-left liberal Democratic politicians like Andrew Cuomo, like Bill de Blasio, like Hillary Clinton. And Donald Trump has supported those candidates and supported their positions on a lot of issues.
One final question I want to ask you.
So Senator Ted Cruz is definitely trying to milk the New York values for as much as he can. And the thing is, his basic premise there is actually true. I saw over on Meet the Press Daily on Friday, they brought back this clip from, I think it's October 24th, 1999, where Donald Trump was on Meet the Press, and he not only talked about his values being New York values on gay issues and abortion issues, but he specifically said they're New York values, not Iowa values. So it's like totally appropriate, at least, for what Senator Ted Cruz said was the premise of his using it is actually true. And I took that clip. This is from Meet the Press Friday, their Meet the Press Daily on last Friday, but then it goes back to the October 24th, 1999 clip of Donald Trump talking about his New York values over here.
Yes. But Trump made that point himself, actually, one time on a certain program called Meet the Press, and he did in 1999. In fact, here was his response to the idea of openly gay military personnel.
It would not disturb me. Again, I'd want to talk to lots of experts within the military, but it's not something that would disturb me. I mean, hey, I lived in New York City and Manhattan all my life, okay? So, my views are a little bit different than if I lived in Iowa, perhaps. And again, it may be a little bit of a New York background because there is some different attitude in different parts of the country. And, I was raised in New York and grew up and work and everything else in New York City. But I am strongly for choice, and yet I hate the concept of abortion.
So the argument...
So you can see there, Donald Trump actually, at least way back in 1999, called his own values New York values and contrasted them to Iowa values, specifically on issues relating to gays and abortion. So that may turn out to be a good line of attack for Ted Cruz. The more that factual basis gets brought up to the evangelical Iowa voters, I think the better that attack's going to do from Ted Cruz. But at the debate last Thursday, I think Donald Trump did a good job of turning it around on Ted Cruz, and especially going to 9/11, which the Republican voters love references to 9/11. And that's kind of what Donald Trump does over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where George Stephanopoulos brings up this whole New York values issue, and and you can see how Donald Trump actually goes really hard into Ted Cruz and says he's a nasty guy and dishonest and too close to the Wall Street banks, and he's no longer sparing Ted Cruz in any way from negative attacks over in this clip.
On this issue of New York values, he lumped you in yesterday with Hillary Clinton, Andrew Cuomo, Bill de Blasio, and said he apologizes to the millions of New Yorkers let down by liberal politicians.
Look, the truth is he's a nasty guy. He was so nice to me. I mean, I knew it. I was watching. I kept saying, come on, Ted, let's go, kid. But he's a nasty guy. Nobody likes him. Nobody in Congress likes him. Nobody likes him anywhere once they get to know him. He's a very... he's got an edge that's not good. You can't make deals with people like that, and it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing for the country. Very nasty guy.
He's also circulating that clip of you on Tim Russert in 1999. You said, I lived in New York City and Manhattan all my life, okay? So you know my views are a little bit different than if I lived in Iowa. So those were your words.
Yeah. A long time ago, and just so you understand, he's taking money from people that are very much into the whole gay marriage situation, and he's taking money from them, and he's, you know, raising funds from them. Then he got caught the other day in a tape when he was raising funds at a law office talking about things that are priorities and not priorities.
So
this was not a priority.
Hypocrite?
Oh, he's a total hypocrite. How about his fundraising, and how about when he does his personal financial disclosure form, and he doesn't put on that he's borrowing money from Goldman Sachs, and then today it comes out that he's also borrowing money from Citibank, and he doesn't list it. You know why? He wants to look like Robin Hood, that he's the one protecting the people from the banks. Well, he's actually borrowing money and personally guaranteeing it and not disclosing it, which is illegal.
But how about you? Those were your words. You were talking about in that interview issues like gay marriage, talking about how you were strongly pro-choice. And it was your comparison of New York values and Iowa views. And it's led a lot of conservatives to think, boy, maybe he's going to switch again. He's not going to be with us.
It doesn't matter what they think. It doesn't matter. They understand me. They understand trade. I don't consider myself to be anything. You know, when they ask labels, we're talking about labels. I consider myself to be, right now,
so you're
somebody
not a conservative?
I'm conservative, but when it comes to different elements of what I believe in, that's what people really understand. I'm going to solve our trade problem. I'm going to solve our military problem. I'm going to get rid of ISIS. I'm going to create borders. I'm going to do the things that this is what they want.
But they're afraid you're going to abandon conservative issues if you get the
I don't think too many people are afraid of that, okay? Because if you look at the polls, I'm leading Ted Cruz by a lot. He even lied about that. You know, he got up and said, well, the polls. Well, the polls are showing that I'm the one that's on the upswing. He's the one on the downswing, a big downswing. But when you look at what he said, and when you look at the way he said it and the scorn toward New York, I thought it was a disgrace in light of the World Trade Center, in light of all the people that died. And think about the firemen that went up those buildings, and they were killed instantaneously. And they probably pretty much knew those buildings were coming down, and they're going up to save lives. And by the way, speaking of Iowa, which I love, and I'm leading in the polls right now in Iowa, by the way, but I love, we had firemen from Iowa, which was so beautiful, and other places, many other places, coming to the World Trade Center to help. You had people from Iowa, in particular the fire department, coming all the way from Iowa to help with the World Trade Center. And here's Ted Cruz putting down that and the great, you know, the great people of New York. No, he's putting down the great people of New York. But, hey, you've been there. Who could have done, very few people could have done what New Yorkers did under that unbelievable circumstance.
Let's talk about some of the issues.
So I guess Ted Cruz hates 9/11 first responders is what he meant when he said that he doesn't hold the same New York values that Donald Trump holds. I love it when Republicans fight. So that's Donald Trump and Ted Cruz are really going after each other. And before I leave the George Stephanopoulos interview with Donald Trump, one thing I thought was kind of funny was when George Stephanopoulos asked Donald Trump this question about the possibility of Michael Bloomberg's third-party run, which that would be a really interesting twist to the whole 2016 election. But what's really remarkable about Donald Trump's answer here is the way that he and George Stephanopoulos argue about who is actually closer to Hillary Clinton. Sit down, Sandy. And you can see that back and forth in this 1-minute clip here.
Mike Bloomberg, he's pulled a three-way race with you and Hillary in it. Sources say that it would show a very competitive race. Does that worry you?
I would love to have Michael join the race. First of all, he's a friend of mine. He's a great guy. I'd love to, because he would be, I think, take a lot of votes away from Hillary. If it's going to be Hillary, I mean, I'm looking now. Is it going to be Hillary? You tell me. She's your friend. I mean, she's like your best friend.
She went to your wedding.
Okay. That's interesting. But, well, she had to, though. You know why? Because I contribute. And she probably went to your wedding, too, because you contribute.
She didn't go to
right?
my wedding.
She didn't go to your wedding? That's surprising. So here's the story. I would say if Michael came in, he would take a lot of votes away from Hillary.
Final
You
question.
know why? One of the reasons. Guns. Michael is very much anti-gun. I am very pro-Second
So you'd
Amendment.
welcome him in the race if you get the nomination?
I would love to have him in the race. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, but I would love to have him in the race. It's very late for anybody to join the race right now. I mean, I know the filing requirements, and for anybody to come in right now, it's very late.
Letter in the Boston Globe yesterday.
So I thought it was interesting the way that Donald Trump and George Stephanopoulos argued about who is closer to Hillary Clinton. And then also it was kind of interesting the way Donald Trump admitted that he has kind of looked into a third-party run. That's how he knows that Michael Bloomberg might have problems with a third-party run, is because he's looked into it himself. And before I leave this George Stephanopoulos interview with Donald Trump, I actually have a couple more clips from it. But this next clip I thought was an interesting question that I didn't see asked on any of the other programs where Donald Trump did interviews. Has to do with whether he's going to be done if he loses in Iowa. I think I showed an answer to a similar question a couple weeks back, but it sounds like he has a plan for winning Iowa and for not winning Iowa, as he explains to George Stephanopoulos in this clip.
As you know, all of the latest polls have me #1 in Iowa, and I have a great feeling toward Iowa and a great relationship with the people and with the evangelicals and the Tea Party. No, we're looking to do very well. I mean, it's going to be very exciting. February 1st, we start.
What do you think of that theory that if you lose Iowa, that your whole appeal is based on being a winner? If you lose Iowa, it all spirals down.
I think I'll do well in Iowa. If I don't quite make it in Iowa, at a minimum, I do think it's going to be close. But I think I'm going to win Iowa. I think I'm going to do fantastically in New Hampshire. You see the polls there, and South Carolina going to be great. You look at Nevada, it's going to be good. I think I'm going to do well.
So it sounds like Donald Trump is in a really big fight with Ted Cruz for Iowa, and he has a strategy for winning Iowa, obviously. If he wins Iowa and wins New Hampshire, it's almost like the whole thing's over. And he also has a strategy for, doing well in Iowa, but not actually beating Ted Cruz in Iowa. And the next subtopic of the Republican side of the 2016 presidential race I want to move on to here is something that was a big issue in the debate and over the last week, but didn't really come up that much on the Sunday shows. It was the topic of whether Ted Cruz is a citizen eligible to run for president. And first I want to show over on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, and I guess this is the first real-time clip I'm showing of the 4 I'm going to show to you tonight. This is Bill Maher in his monologue talking about Donald Trump being on message, and he makes a reference to that controversy over in this clip.
Potty-trained Republicans still think that they're in charge of the funny farm. It's Trump's party now, guys. Get the memo. It's Donald Trump's party, and it probably is going to be his country soon. And boy, did he stay on message last night. Donald Trump said swarthy foreigners are sneaking into America, but enough about Ted Cruz. Oh. As well, it's a good point. As you know, Ted Cruz, not born in this country. He was born in Hades, the child of Satan and a dog. And when Donald Trump and Ted Cruz fight, it's impossible to know who to root for. It's like a car salesman versus a car thief. It's Putin bombing ISIS. It's like Sharknado if the shark fought the tornado.
So, yeah, I thought that was kind of a funny set of jokes from Bill Maher in his monologue on Friday. I've been reading your live comments down in the comment section, and I see people asking if I'm going to be doing live commentary on the Democratic debate. As I said right at the very beginning, I had hoped to finish this live clip roundup before the Democratic debate started. It looks like I'm going to finish a little after the debate starts, and For my live viewers, I guess you can go over and watch the debate if you want to do that. And for those watching as a recorded show, the debate will be over by the time you see this. But I may go and do a clip roundup like 12 or 16 hours from now, like Monday morning, late Monday morning, Pacific time here in California. That's Greenwich Mean Time minus 8 hours. You can let me know down in the comment section if you want me to do that. If you want me to put the time in, I'm going to decide for sure based on what you say in the comment section, and also after watching the debate, seeing if there are good clips that I can make some good commentary on. So sorry that I'm going to bleed, that the end of this broadcast is going to bleed into the beginning of the Democratic debate. I got it started as quickly as I could, and I apologize for that. I now want to move on to a Donald Trump clip, kind of on that Ted Cruz citizenship issue that Bill Maher was making fun of in that last clip. Donald Trump staying on message against swarthy foreigners, but enough about Ted Cruz. In this clip, he talks about the possibility of actually suing Ted Cruz, and then he goes again into like really nasty attacks on Ted Cruz's character, which I will discuss after you watch that clip from This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning here.
Example that Cruz has a real problem with his place of birth, and there are many people that are saying that right now. In fact, since I spoke to you the last time, he's been sued, and I told you he'd get sued.
But you know, the person who sued him probably doesn't have standing. A lot of legal scholars
there'll be a lot of people that sue him that do have standing.
Who say you have standing. Why don't you file the
that's
suit?
An interesting case. Wow, that sounds like a very good case. I do the public a big favor.
So are you going to do it?
You know, so interesting with Ted. He was so nice to me, and I kept saying, he's not a nice guy. You know, he was nice. He wanted to go in the wake, right? So I said, so nice, so nice, so nice. I said, when is it going to happen? Well, it happened during the debate because he lied about the polls, because I was going up. In fact, that same day, as you know, Wall Street Journal, NBC came out with a poll, and the headline, Trump way up, him way down, and yet he lied about that. So it's just, I find it very interesting, but it's going to be an interesting race. But I don't think, let me just say, I don't think he's going to do very well.
He said you should put your money where your mouth is. If you really believe in this, you should file the suit.
Well, it's a good idea. Maybe I'll talk to them about that. I'd like to talk to Ted about that. Let's see how he'd feel about it.
Well, you were really,
because you know, when I file suits, I file real suits. Okay.
You were really unloading on him today. Let's talk about that.
No, I'm unloading because he's been very dishonest. He has a personal financial disclosure form where he didn't put down the banks, and yet he criticizes the banks, and he's going to be Robin Hood, and he's going to take care of the banks. He didn't want the public to see that he went out and borrowed money from Goldman Sachs. Then 2 days later, it came out it wasn't only Goldman Sachs, it was also Citibank. He didn't want the government to, he doesn't want the public to see that. The reason is because he wants the public to think that he's this wonderful guy that's protecting them from the bad, vicious bankers. Well, he borrows money from the banks and got them at a very good rate, and he's got personal guarantees. And why that's not down in his personal financial disclosure. He said, oh, he made a paper mistake. Oh, really? So he made the mistake with Goldman Sachs. But now it comes out 2 days later, he also made the mistake with Citibank. How many other banks does he borrow from? It'd be very interesting. You know what? I have 100 pages, almost 100 pages, talking about billions and billions of dollars. I didn't make a mistake. And they've gone through by everybody. I didn't make a mistake. He's got a couple of pages with a couple of loans, and he forgets the main banks, 2 banks he's got, and he can't put that down. That wasn't a mistake. He knew that those banks
were there. Let's talk about national security. Rubio versus Cruz on national.
So, like I said, it looks like Donald Trump is really going against Ted Cruz now. Their, ceasefire or their their pact where they didn't attack each other, and they said that Ted Cruz was like drafting behind Donald Trump and trying not to offend any of his voters, so that if Donald Trump started dropping, he could grab onto the Donald Trump voters. Well, they are both going against each other. And the thing about all those negative attacks from Donald Trump on Ted Cruz, they aren't really what scares me about Ted Cruz. None of those things he mentioned. What really scares me about Ted Cruz is, well, there are a lot of things that scare me about Ted Cruz, but one is the way he is really bloodthirsty in his foreign policy statements, even though he's actually not as interventionist as some of the other candidates in terms of putting troops on the ground. But he made that statement about carpet bombing, and he's never really backed off of it. And I want to show from his this is a clip from Fox News Sunday, his interview with Chris Wallace, where I think Chris Wallace did a good job of actually confronting him on the problems with his carpet bombing strategy against ISIS, which I will discuss after you watch that clip over here.
Force and fury is not the first time that you've used very sharp military rhetoric, which has been controversial. Here's how you said you would handle another threat.
We will have a president who will make clear we will utterly destroy ISIS. We will carpet bomb them into oblivion.
But, Senator, carpet bombing against ISIS would never work. ISIS is embedded in civilian populations in major cities. And if I may, I want to put up this statement here by Bob Scales. He's one of the leading U.S. military thinkers, former head of the Army War College. He said, carpet bombing, that's just another one of those phrases that people with no military experience throw around.
Well, look, I will apologize to no one with how vigorous I will be winning the war on terror, defeating radical Islamic terrorism. We will start by having a president willing to acknowledge our enemy, say it by its name, which President Obama and Hillary Clinton refused to do. And you want to know what carpet bombing means? Yesterday was the 25th anniversary of the beginning of Desert Storm. In 1991, we had roughly 8,000 planes. Today we have 4,000. Our Air Force has dropped in half. In 1991, we had 529 ships in our Navy. Today we have 272. It's dropped nearly in half. In 1991, we had over a third more soldiers in our Army. And we were launching 1,100 air attacks a day. We were carpet bombing them. And after 37 days of 1,100 air attacks a day, our troops went in a day and a half and mopped up the remnants of the Iraqi army, because that's the effect of carpet bombing. You know what we're doing now? We're doing between 15 and 30 air attacks
There's a big difference. First of all, military people will tell you we didn't carpet bomb in Kuwait, in the Gulf War, that we did precision striking. In addition, if I may, the Iraqi army was all massed by itself in the Kuwaiti desert. We're now talking about ISIS soldiers who are not massed. They're embedded in Mosul. They're embedded in Raqqa with civilians. But if I may, sir, let me move on to...
Hold on. If you're going to make a point, let me respond to it.
Okay, but go ahead. I would like to ask you about some of your votes, though, and not the rhetoric.
If you're going to make a point, let me respond to it.
Go ahead, sir.
Which is, right now, our rules of engagement, what we're saying, 15, 20 attacks a day, it's photo op foreign policy. So we're not taking out the oil fields. We're not taking out, for example, we saw recent reports about Jihadist University, where they're training jihadists. Why isn't that building rubble? We're not using overwhelming air power. You know, in 1991, we had 2,000 planes there launching this air attack. We have about 200 right now fighting against ISIS. And the difference is we do not have directed, concentrated effort, because this president pretends like this enemy doesn't exist, like these are isolated lone wolves. He gives this State of the Union that is a state of denial, where he says, gosh, you know, ISIS is a bunch of guys in pickup trucks. No. They are a serious terrorist force that has declared war on us. We can defeat them, but we can't defeat them if the president is unwilling to do so. And as president, I will defeat ISIS. We will utterly destroy them, and it takes a commander-in-chief directing our forces to do that.
Let's talk about your record.
So, Ted Cruz there did not back off his carpet bombing remark, despite a pretty good job by Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace and pointing out that his argument really doesn't make any sense, that and then even his response to that about how we're going to carpet bomb them like we carpet bombed them in Desert Storm, you know, the first Persian Gulf War, and Chris Wallace did a good job of pointing out why that was kind of stupid. But you know, the important thing is to be strong against ISIS. It doesn't really matter if what you're saying makes sense, apparently, in the Republican primaries this year, as long as you're showing strength in what you say. And I thought over on CBS's Face the Nation, Marco Rubio kind of tried to show the same thing in answer to a question from John Dickerson about why he bought a gun on New Year's Eve. And he tried to point out that it wasn't his first gun, although it sounds like there might have been a gap in his gun ownership. Like he bought this gun so that if he was like asked to raise who on the Republican, you know, stage owns a gun, and he could raise his hand or whatever, because now he owns a gun, because it sounds like he didn't own a gun for a while. But what's really funny about it is by the end of this answer, you'll see the reason he bought the gun was to to defend his family against ISIS. I'm not kidding. That's what he said to John Dickerson this morning on Face the Nation here.
People buying firearms recently, and you bought one on Christmas Eve. Why?
Well, first of all, I'm not home very often, and so those were one of the few days that I was there. Second, I have a right to protect my family, and that's why I was previously a firearm holder as well. This was an additional one. And again, I think many Americans around the country feel the same way. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I have a right to protect my family if someone were to come after us. In fact, if ISIS were to visit us or our communities at any moment, the last line of defense between ISIS and my family is the ability that I have to protect my family from them or from a criminal or anyone else that seeks to do us harm. Millions of Americans feel that way.
All right, Senator Marco Rubio, thanks for being with us.
So what was Senator Marco Rubio doing on Christmas Eve? Well, he was out buying a gun to defend his family against ISIS. I don't know, is that what normal Americans were out doing on Christmas Eve? Maybe I'm not a normal American, but I think over on Facebook I posted a picture of going to see Star Wars The Force Awakens on Christmas, but that wasn't, I did not buy a gun on Christmas Eve. You can let me know down in the comment section if you bought a gun on Christmas Eve, but as long as I'm showing clips of Marco Rubio, and then there was that Ted Cruz clip, I want to show a follow-up to the Republican clip roundup I did where I showed the extended confrontation between Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio on the issue of immigration. Well, that came up over on NBC's Meet the Press, where Chuck Todd brought up some of Marco Rubio's flip-flops, and his whole argument back in the debate didn't really make sense, that, you know, now he had to be more strict about immigration since ISIS has been created, because now there's this sophisticated terrorist group that knows our immigration system and is, you know, using our legal immigration system against us. But of course, that's what Al-Qaeda did back on September 11th in 2001. So that's not really a new development. And here's how Marco Rubio tries to explain what he's learned and how he's changed his position on immigration to Chuck Todd on Meet the Press this morning here.
In Thursday's Republican debate, he took on Ted Cruz directly, accusing him of serially changing his positions.
Ted Cruz, you used to say you supported doubling the number of green cards. Now you say that you're against it. You used to support a 500% increase in the number of guest workers. Now you say that you're against it. You used to support legalizing people that were here illegally. Now you say you're against it. You used to say that you were in favor of birthright citizenship. Now you say that you are against it. And by the way, it's not just on immigration. You used to support TPA. Now you say you're against it. I saw you on the Senate floor flip your vote on crop insurance because they told you it would help you in Iowa. And last week we all saw you flip your vote on ethanol in Iowa for the same reason. That is not consistent conservatism. That is political calculation.
So last night, I began by asking Rubio whether he wasn't also guilty of changing his positions many times, particularly on immigration.
If circumstances change or you learn something along the way, it's reasonable to say maybe a different approach will work better. So for example, on immigration, it is clear no comprehensive solution to immigration is going to pass. But don't go around pretending that you never do. And certainly don't go around pretending and telling everyone, like Ted Cruz does, that he is the only consistent conservative running for president. The fact of the matter is that Ted has shown a propensity throughout his career in the U.S. Senate to take one position in front of one audience and then change his position in front of another. So he raises money in New York and then criticizes New York values. On the policy issues, he used to be in favor of legalizing people that are here illegally, and he said so in front of one audience, but then he portrays this sort of notion that he's the harshest and hardest when it comes to that issue. That's not been his record. And if you recall, that was in response to an attack from him in the debate, and I think it's important to point out that on the issue he was attacking me on, his record used to be something very different than what he makes it sound like.
Let me ask you, by the way, quickly on the 11 million. Are you still for finding a way for them to legally stay in the United States?
Yeah, look, if you're a criminal alien, no, you can't stay. If you're someone that hasn't been here for a very long time, you can't stay.
Wait a minute. Define criminal alien.
You have to have a reasonable solution.
Define criminal alien. Isn't
A
anybody
felon?
who's here
A
illegal?
felon?
Okay, so not because
Well,
some
other
people
than
argue
the immigration law,
yeah,
right? I mean, obviously,
okay,
but
all
no,
right.
but I've said that before, Todd. That's been convinced. I mean, a felon, someone who's committed a crime, a non-immigration related, obviously, and that's what I've talked about in the past. So I do believe. I don't think you're going to round up and deport 12 million people. Here's what I've said, though. It is very clear now more than ever that we are not going to be able to do anything on people that are here illegally until we first prove to people that illegal immigration is under control and America is safe. And ISIS poses a very unique threat, unlike anything we have faced in the past.
Very quickly, you brought up...
So that's Marco Rubio trying to extend his attack on Ted Cruz on the immigration issue, and that clip that Chuck Todd showed at the beginning, I think, is like the best attack that Marco Rubio got off on Ted Cruz near the end of the debate, and I showed that in the clip roundup that I did on Friday. And on the issue of rounding up the undocumented immigrants in the United States, you may remember on the program last week, I showed a clip from Ted Cruz's interview. It wasn't on CBS's Face of the Nation, it was on CNN's State of the Union, where Jake Tapper was trying to get him to talk about how he was going to round up the undocumented immigrants to deport them, and how Donald Trump has said that he is going to send out a force to round them up, and Ted Cruz wouldn't do that because we don't send jackbooted thugs to American homes to round people up, for anything. He said, we don't do that for murder. Go house to house with people looking for murderers, so we're not going to do that for undocumented immigrants. Well, over on State of the Union, Jake Tapper asked Donald Trump about that, and of course Donald Trump didn't back down, despite the jackbooted thug label that Ted Cruz had put on it, and he went back to this answer he gave a while back about Eisenhower. I like Ike, such a nice guy. Eisenhower, I like Ike, did this, what no one says in this question and answer, what was called Operation Wetback, where they deported a whole bunch of undocumented immigrants, and some of them died in the desert, and they actually deported a lot of American citizens, and it was like a really nasty episode in U.S. history that I don't think Donald Trump should be looking at as a model for future policy, but he's still sticking to it, talking to Jake Tapper this morning on State of the Union over in this clip.
Called for a deportation force that would actively eject 11 million or so, however many there are, undocumented immigrants. I asked Ted Cruz about that last week. He said he would strengthen the border, enforce the law, but he said on this program, on State of the Union, that, quote, we don't live in a police state. This was a specific rejection of what I said you were proposing, and he said he's not going to send jackboots to people's door. What's your response?
President Eisenhower, who was a very nice man, I like Ike, that was his slogan. Like mine is Make America Great Again, his was I like Ike. And President Eisenhower, probably the real number is 2.3 million, some people say it's 1.5 million, went through this process.
A lot of people think that's a shameful chapter of American history, though.
Well, some people do, and some people think it was a very effective chapter. And what happened is when they removed some, meaning brought them back, when they brought them back, they removed some, everybody else left. And it was very successful in one sense. So, I mean, that's the way it is. Look, we either have a country or we don't. If we don't have strong borders, we have a problem.
Let's talk about an ad that Jeb Bush is running.
So Donald Trump sticking by his jackbooted thugs to go house to house to round up the people who Eisenhower rounded up in Operation Wetback. He still thinks it was a good idea when Eisenhower did it, and he's sticking to it. It's, I don't know, pretty scary to people who understand that undocumented immigrants are generally hard-working members of our community who we really want to bring out of the shadows and include in the American dream through comprehensive immigration reform. Unfortunately, that was blocked by the Republican House of Representatives. And anyway, you can let me know what you think about Donald Trump down in the comment section, and that's my last Donald Trump clip. I have a couple more clips on the Republican side. One is a comedy clip from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, where he talked about one of the big losers in the last debate, I would be really surprised if he has any kind of comeback in Iowa, despite the real appeal he had for the evangelicals who make up a majority of the voters amongst Republicans in Iowa. I'm talking about Dr. Ben Carson, and this is Bill Maher making fun of Dr. Ben Carson's performance in the Republican debate last Thursday in this clip.
Oh, I'm telling you, the testosterone was flowing in that room. They were all so amped up, except, of course. What can I say about Dr. Ben Carson, the human screensaver? I mean... Everybody else would talk and fulminate, and then they would go to him. It was like, and now a word from the International Space Station. Every time he would talk, it would take a few seconds for him to come back online like a computer that was in sleep mode. It's just sad. They asked him if he would put boots on the ground to fight ISIS, and his answer was, imagine if ISIS nuked, because they have nukes. Imagine if ISIS nuked our electrical grid. That would be really bad. He's just not really presidential material. He's more like the guy who starts talking to you when you're waiting for the bus.
So, like I said, I thought that was just a fairly humorous joke from Bill Maher's monologue. I don't think Ben Carson is really going to be a factor anymore, but who knows? It could be a surprise in Iowa because he does have some appeal to the evangelicals there. We'll have to wait and see what happens on February 1st, especially because the Iowa caucuses, where people have to go and stay there for a while and move to different corners of the room to show who they support. And it's not just going and filling out a ballot and going home. It takes some real commitment. So sometimes the polls aren't completely accurate as to, it's not like just voting. It's caucusing. Sometimes the people who are more have like really committed supporters do better in caucuses than people who will just tell a pollster that they're supporting that candidate. Anyway, I have one more clip on the Republican side, though it's a Senator Bernie Sanders clip, so it really belongs on the Democratic side. I'm using it as kind of a transitional clip. It's Senator Bernie Sanders over on CBS's Face the Nation, and he did he did 4 of the 5 Sunday morning shows, all except for Fox News Sunday, just like Hillary Clinton. I guess they did the full Ginsburg minus the really biased station Fox News and Fox News Sunday. And here's Bernie Sanders talking about Donald Trump. That's why I'm putting it over in the Republican topic. And he's basically explaining why he's called Donald Trump a pathological liar in response to a question from John Dickerson this morning here.
You said Donald Trump is a pathological liar. Yeah. Why specifically?
Well, I'll give you one example. I mean, when he goes around telling people that I want to raise their taxes by 90%, that's a lie. Never said that. It's not true. Number 2, more importantly, he is trying to divide this nation, okay? And he tells us that the Mexicans who are coming into this country are drug dealers, they're rapists, they're criminals. I mean, that's just a lie. But even worse, he goes around saying, Donald Trump, I saw on television thousands of Muslims celebrating on 9/11 when the Twin Towers went down. It's a lie. There is no evidence. There was never anything on television. It never happened. He has not apologized. He keeps saying it. That is a pathological lie.
All right, Senator Sanders, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
So that's the last clip on the Republican side, and it's really kind of the beginning of the Democratic side of the 2016 presidential race that I'm covering as I see the debate is starting. I don't know if that... I noticed a slight dip in my live viewers. I guess I can't really blame you if you switch over from my commentary from the Sunday morning shows over to the Democratic debate. But I am going to show a bunch of clips of Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders back and forth in this next section that is probably a preview of what you're going to see in the debate, or maybe if you are watching this as a recorded show and not having watched the debate, this is kind of a preview very close to what I expect to see in the debate. And the first clip I want to show is actually from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where they showed Bernie Sanders' new ad hitting Hillary Clinton on her Wall Street connections, and then a little bit of the back and forth during this last week between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders on that issue here.
There are two Democratic visions for regulating Wall Street. One says it's okay to take millions from big banks and then tell them what to do.
President Obama, who, as you might recall, took a lot of money from the financial industry when he ran in 2008. So it's a funny kind of charge.
I think anybody who looks at that ad understands it's not a negative ad. It's absolutely truthful.
Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton.
So that was a little introductory thing that they did on ABC. And the next clip I want to show is from Hillary Clinton's interview on ABC, where George Stephanopoulos asked her not about the ad they showed there, but about a Republican super PAC ad from Karl Rove that kind of attacked her on the same issues. And then George Stephanopoulos asked about that, and you'll see Hillary Clinton saying she's feels complimented by that. And then when George Stephanopoulos brings up the specific attacks from Bernie Sanders, I'll show you the clip, and I'll talk about it a little more after you watch it yourself over here.
Over Wall Street. We heard a little bit of that going into this, and I was struck this morning. American Crossroads, the super PAC founded by Karl Rove, who of course worked for President George W. Bush, has just launched this online ad in Iowa.
Hillary Clinton's gotten 54 times more money from Wall Street interests than from all of Iowa. Hillary rewarded Wall Street with the $700 billion bailout. Then Wall Street made her a multi-millionaire.
I represented Wall Street.
You sure did, Hillary.
Now that echoes the points being made by Bernie Sanders in his campaign. Are you worried that your ties to Wall Street are weighing you down?
Well, first let me say, I think it shows how desperate the Republicans are to prevent me from becoming the nominee. I find that, in a perverse way, an incredibly flattering comment on their anxiety, because they know that not only will I stand up for what the country needs, I will take it to the Republicans. I have a track record which shows I know how to stand up to them, and I will win. So I think this just proves my point that I'm the strongest candidate to go up against any Republican. With the back and forth on Wall Street, I think it's, look, I have stood up to Wall Street, even though I did represent New York. I have advocated for changes. But what I find sort of strange is, number one, the ad that Senator Sanders ran was really against all Democrats who ever took any contributions from anybody associated with the financial industry. That would include President Obama, who took more than anyone ever had in 2008. That did not stop him from turning around and imposing the toughest rules on Wall Street since the 1930s. Same with Barney Frank, who has actually written about this. That is just a false charge. But in addition, I think it's important for us to look at our respective plans. In fact, everyone who has offered an opinion about the plan that Senator Sanders has proposed and the one I've put together has said mine is tougher, mine is more comprehensive, it would be more effective, because it tries to get not just at the problems of yesterday, but the potential problems of tomorrow, going after shadow banking and investment banks and big insurance companies, like what we saw in 2008, where Lehman Brothers and AIG were principal causes of what happened to us. And I think, finally, I would say that I have gotten maybe 3% of my, less than 3% of my contributions this time from anybody associated with financial industry activities. I've gotten so much more from students and teachers. 90% of my contributions are from smaller donors and 60% from women. So I'm just, I didn't know about Karl Rove's ad against me, but it kind of boosts me up because I assume he thinks that I am going to get the nomination, and he's trying to interfere with the Iowa caucus to maybe confuse people on their way to caucus for me.
Madam Secretary, thanks very much for your time this morning.
Now, I have said in the past that the two biggest problems I have with Hillary Clinton, that my two biggest worries about her are her closeness to Wall Street and her hawkishness and interventionism on foreign policy. Those are two things where she's more to the right than I am that I worry most about. And that answer there to George Stephanopoulos didn't really assuage my concerns very much when she was talking about how it's complementary and how she's taking on Wall Street. And I'll be interested to see how that shakes out in the debate that's starting right around now, and that looks like from the comment section, at least on the live show, that a lot of you want me to do a Democratic debate clip roundup tomorrow, so hopefully I'll have a chance to do that. Hopefully I'll find enough good clips to make it worthwhile. And the next two sections of the topic of the 2016 Democratic presidential campaign, I think, is going to look a lot like what you're seeing at the Democratic debate. First, on the issue of guns, I have a few clips going back and forth between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. And then on the issue of health care, I have, I think, 4 clips. And the last couple are on the attack from Chelsea Clinton on Bernie Sanders' single-payer proposal, which actually Bernie Sanders just made public the details of his single-payer proposal, which I'll talk about when I get to that. But first, on the issue of guns, I'll start with Hillary Clinton making her attack on Bernie Sanders on the issue of guns. This is, let me make sure I get the right clip number here. Oh yeah, this is also from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And you'll see that she is ready for the attack, and George Stephanopoulos just sort of like prods her along, not in any confrontational way, but just letting her do her thing against Bernie Sanders on guns here.
Sanders has been pointing out differences, and one of the issues that I have drawn a very stark contrast on has been guns. I have pointed out repeatedly, because I think it's a critical issue, that Senator Sanders has for years voted many times on behalf of the NRA gun lobby position. And one of the most egregious of those votes was the vote to give immunity from all liability to gun makers and sellers.
He now supports taking that away.
When, well, he flip-flopped last night, said that he would sign on to a bill that is currently pending in the House and Senate to repeal that liability. And I'm delighted that he has had a change of heart. I think that's all to the good. Now, I hope he will take a hard look at what we call the Charleston loophole. That's a provision he also voted for that gives a gun to a potential buyer after 3 days, whether or not the background check has been completed. And it's called the Charleston loophole because that's how the killer in Charleston got his gun. When, if there had been a little more time, information would have come to light that would have shown he was prohibited. And of course, we know he used that gun to go to Mother Emanuel Church and murder 9 faithful people at Bible study. So I want to see movement against the gun lobby, because we cannot continue to lose 90 people a day, 33,000 a year to gun violence. And I welcome Senator Sanders moving on one of the issues he was wrong on. I hope he will continue to move.
And we're going to ask him about that in a few minutes.
So, yeah, Hillary Clinton's really going after Bernie Sanders. That is probably a lot of what you're going to hear at the debate that's going on, that he's moved on one thing he was wrong on, and he has to move on this Charleston loophole. The debate tonight is taking place pretty close to that church in Charleston. It's taking place in Charleston, South Carolina, so that should be a hot topic. And now I'm going to show a couple clips of Bernie Sanders responding on the gun issue. First, here he is talking to George Stephanopoulos on This Week, responding to what Hillary Clinton said here.
Will do is be supportive of this legislation. There is an amendment, though, that I want to see incorporated into it, which is non-controversial.
Sanders has been pointing out differences. And
sorry about that. I skipped. First, I want to show a more, not the clip from This Week with George Stephanopoulos. I want to start off with the Chuck Todd clip from Meet the Press. This is Bernie Sanders talking both about how he's changed his position on gun manufacturer immunity, and then also the so-called Charleston loophole in response to questions from Chuck Todd on Meet the Press this morning here.
About the issue of gun safety. Let me start with one of the issues that's likely to come up tonight at the debate, and that's the issue of gun safety. Last night, in what the Clinton campaign is referring to as a debate eve conversion, you came out in favor of essentially repealing immunity for gun manufacturers when it comes to being held liable for gun deaths. That is a switch of your positions. What brought you to this conclusion?
Well, not really. You know, I understand that Secretary Clinton and her campaign understand that, you know, they're losing ground. We started this campaign off at 3% in the polls, and now we're closing in Iowa. We're doing really well in New Hampshire. So I think in the next 2 weeks, you're going to see a lot of nonsense being thrown around. Look,
this is nonsense? I mean, you did
D-minus.
You did change your position on this, though.
What I said, Chuck, what I said several months ago, having a D-minus voting record from the NRA, having voted to ban assault weapons way back in 1988. Yeah, that was a piece of legislation that I wanted to relook at. And what that legislation had, among other things, is a prohibition on armor-piercing ammunition designed to kill police officers. It had language in it for a child lock safety for our kids, important provision. There were things in it that I did not like and that I was willing to rethink. We have rethought it. There's a bill apparently being introduced. I like that bill. It makes some good changes, and we will be supportive of it.
All right, another thing that's going to come up on the issue of gun safety is the issue of a waiting period. The Clinton campaign is hitting you for supporting only a 3-day waiting period or instant background checks and not being in favor of something longer like a 5-day or a 7-day window. And the reason this is being brought up is that if Dylan Roof, the man who killed those 9 folks in Charleston last year, if there had been a longer waiting period, he might have been prevented from buying a gun.
Look, what we saw here in Charleston is a tragedy of unspeakable dimensions. A guy sits in prayer with people, then he takes out a gun and shoots 9 people. I hope we don't have to politicize that issue. I believe very strongly in an instant background check. I think we have to expand it. I think we have to make sure 100% that we keep guns out of the hands of people who should not have that, people with criminal backgrounds, people who are mentally unstable. That has been my view from day one. But you know, Chuck, I think the reason that the Clinton campaign is getting defensive is they see that we have the momentum. They see that the issues that we are talking about, a disappearing middle class, and almost all new income and wealth going to the top 1%, a corrupt campaign finance system where people like Secretary Clinton can raise millions of dollars through super PACs. Those are kind of the issues that they don't want to discuss. So tonight, we're going to be discussing a lot of issues. And the main issue for me is why the rich get richer, almost everybody else gets poorer, and the fact that we have got to stand up to the billionaire class and change those dynamics.
So you're not in favor of a longer background check, a 7-day background check?
We are willing to look at anything that makes sense, that keeps guns out of the hands of people who should not have them. But I'm not going to be defensive on that issue. I lost an election in 1988, probably lost an election because I had the courage back then to say that assault weapons should not be sold in America.
Let me ask you quickly about the...
So that was the longer answer from Bernie Sanders I wanted to show on gun control. And, you know, like I said, both Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton did 4 of the 5 morning shows this morning. So I didn't choose a lot of clips where they also talked about guns. But one thing Bernie Sanders said over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, I didn't see him say anywhere else, is in this clip that I started show before by mistake. It's Bernie Sanders talking about this amendment he wants so that they look to see what the impact is on rural gun sellers, like gun shops in rural areas, to make sure that they don't get too much liability from this gun manufacturer liability, that they may repeal the law that took away gun manufacturer and seller liability, I guess. And this is the last clip on the gun issue for the program here.
Will do is be supportive of this legislation. There is an amendment, though, that I want to see incorporated into it, which is non-controversial, which monitors the the impact on small gun shops in rural America. Bottom line is, I think that when a gun shop sells a gun legally to somebody, and then something bad happens, I don't think it's fair to hold that.
But what about closing this Charleston loophole, the 3-day waiting, that the person gets the gun after 3 days no matter what?
Well, that one was we're going to take a look at that as well. But the issue here is that what my view has always been, and what is most important, is that we have a strong instant background check. I have supported that from day one. I want to see that expanded and improved. Look, at the end of the day, what almost every American understands is we have got to keep guns out of the hands of people who should not have those guns. That has been my position from as far back as I can remember.
On the issue of health care, she made the point that you can't...
So you heard at the end of that last clip that George Stephanopoulos was about to bring up the issue of health care, and I want to transition from the gun issue now to the health care issue. I have 4 clips that starting with another clip of Hillary Clinton. Here she is explaining why she opposes supposedly Bernie Sanders' single-payer system, even though most Democrats are supposed to supposedly think that single-payer is better than the kind of weird Obamacare system that we ended up with. But Hillary Clinton is a big supporter of Obamacare, I guess, over in this clip.
Been very protective of your daughter, Chelsea Clinton, especially when she was a child, of course, and now she's a grown woman. This week...
Again, sorry, wrong clip. Here's the Hillary Clinton clip.
Another big difference on health care. He wants to replace Obamacare with a single-payer system, Medicare for all. So are you against that because it's a bad idea or because it's not practical? Would a single-payer system be better if you could get it passed?
Well, first, I share the goal of universal health care. You know very well that I threw myself into that back in 93 and 94 and still have the scars to show for it. So the goal is we want everybody to have access to quality, affordable health care. But I think we should be defending the Affordable Care Act. This is a historic achievement for our country. It certainly is for President Obama. We are making progress. I want us to protect it, to defend it, and to improve it. The Republicans keep trying to repeal it and offer nothing in place of it. So rather than tear it apart or get rid of it and start all over again in a contentious national debate, let's do what I'm proposing to get costs down, get out-of-pocket costs down, get more support for families who face big medical costs. Let's deal with the rising cost of prescription drugs. That, I think, is the right way for the country to go, and it certainly is what I'm advocating.
You also have your differences.
So that's Hillary Clinton attacking the Bernie Sanders approach. She was actually fairly soft in her attack there, although I'll show a clip a little bit later where it gets a little harder, and I think in the debate tonight it'll probably get even a little more nasty between them. But in this next clip I want to show Bernie Sanders both defending his single-payer system and also responding to the charge that he hasn't given details of his plan, and he says he's going to give them soon. One of the breaking news things I saw was he actually gave the detail. He gave out his plan right before the debate started. That basically he's going to pay for his single-payer system with a 2.2% tax on income from workers, and then a 6.2% tax on wages from employers. But that wasn't known when he gave this answer over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. But he did say he would be giving the details soon. Let me make sure I get the right clip this time. Yeah, over here.
She made the point that you can't, it shouldn't tear apart Obamacare. People should be defending the Affordable Care Act. And you still haven't put out all of the details on your plan for Medicare for all. So how high will the top rate go, the top tax rate to pay for it? When will those details be here?
Well, those details are going to be out very, very shortly. But here is the point. Anyone who says, as the Clinton camp has said, is Bernie is going to dismember health care in the United States of America, is going to do millions of people will no longer have the insurance they have. That's nonsense. What everybody understands is that what a Medicare for All program is guaranteeing health care to all people. We still have 29 million Americans today who have no health insurance. We are the only major country on earth doesn't guarantee health care to all people, and yet we spend far, far more per capita on health care than do the people of other countries. So what I want to do is fulfill the vision of people like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Harry Truman, and say health care is a right of all people. I would hope that Secretary Clinton would join me on saying that, and to tell the pharmaceutical industry that they cannot continue to rip off the American people and charge us the highest prices in the world.
But isn't it fair for the voters of Iowa to know how you're going to pay for it? The legislation you had back in 2013 had an additional 6.7% payroll tax on employers, 2.2% on workers. Fair to assume that will be in it as well?
Well, you know what, George? I mean, sometimes where the discussion becomes really absurd is that we will increase Medicare premiums. That is true. But we are doing away with all private health insurance premiums. And sometimes, and it disappoints me that the Clinton camp is kind of sounding like Republicans. The truth of the matter is, A, we spend far more per person on health care than any other nation. And second of all, a Medicare for All single-payer program would substantially, thousands of dollars a year, lower the cost of health insurance for the middle class of this country. So to say, yes, there will be Medicare premiums, yeah, of course there will. It's not free. But we are doing away with all private health insurance costs.
But don't voters have a right to those details before they vote? Shouldn't this?
So I'm not going to go into the detail thing because he gave his details as I explained before the clip. The next two clips on the healthcare issue I want to show, I don't know if this is going to come up during the debate, but it's on whether Hillary Clinton should have used Chelsea Clinton to attack Senator Bernie Sanders on the single-payer issue. I saw this clip, and I was a little taken aback that the first time I ever saw Chelsea Clinton say anything in this campaign, she was saying that Bernie Sanders wanted to dismantle Obamacare, which isn't really what he wants to do with his Medicare for All plan. But here's Hillary Clinton defending the use of Chelsea Clinton because she was answering a question, and also defending the substance of what she said, talking to Jake Tapper on CNN State of the Union this morning here.
Been very protective of your daughter, Chelsea Clinton, especially when she was a child, of course, and now she's a grown woman. This week, she surprised a lot of people when she unleashed one of the most scathing attacks of the cycle, accusing Bernie Sanders of wanting to empower Republican governors who might then cut people's health care. PolitiFact called Chelsea's remarks mostly false. Former Obama advisor David Axelrod said it was not an honest attack, and liberal columnist Mark Shields said the attack turned your daughter into a, quote, political hack. Do you think it was a mistake to muddy up Chelsea like that?
Look, she was asked a question. I love my daughter, and she answered a question. And all I can say, Jake, is that the only health plan we know of from Senator Sanders is what's described in the legislation that he has introduced 9 times in the Congress, in the Senate. And it does turn all of the programs we know of that provide health care over to the states. The federal government would provide a big portion of the cost, but states would be mandated to also pay considerably, about 14% of the cost. That's what's in his bill. So I think anyone who wants to compare and contrast, since we don't have any more current plan from Senator Sanders, has to look at the legislation that he introduced. And yes, if it were going to be state-run, then governors, Republican and Democrat alike, would bear responsibility for appropriating the funds and administering it according to Senator Sanders' own legislative proposals.
But so no regrets about using Chelsea that way?
Oh, I didn't use her. She answered a question, and she gave a factual answer based on the legislation that is the only way we know what Senator Sanders is actually proposing, because he introduced it 9 times in the Congress.
Okay. PolitiFact said it was mostly false, but let's move on. A new movie opened this week.
I like that little editorial comment from Jake Tapper at the end of that back and forth, because what Chelsea Clinton said was mostly false. I've had my problems with PolitiFact in the past, but I think their assessment was pretty accurate. And I don't think it was just some coincidence that Chelsea Clinton answered that question and gave those talking points about Bernie Sanders' healthcare plan, which has now been put out and is now, I'm sure, being debated in Charleston, South Carolina. And I want to show Bernie Sanders talking about the use of Chelsea Clinton and how he was surprised, and also sort of refuting some of the things that Hillary Clinton said. This is also from CNN State of the Union, talking to Jake Tapper this morning here.
It's not a problem.
You and I are old enough to remember when Hillary Clinton was very protective of Chelsea Clinton. She's been involved in past Clinton campaigns, but we've never seen her used to attack a Clinton opponent until this week when she went after your health care plan. I know that you respect Chelsea Clinton and that you believe she's just flat wrong to suggest your plan would take away people's health care and that she hasn't read it. But were you surprised that Chelsea Clinton was deployed in that way?
I was. I mean, Chelsea Clinton is a very, very smart and capable young woman. I'm sure she loves the mother, and she's trying to do everything she can to make sure her mom wins. That's pretty natural. I've got 4 kids, 7 grandchildren. They're rooting for me. But I was a little disappointed that what Chelsea said was simply not accurate. The issue that she was raising is that in Republican conservative states, a Medicare for All bill would not be implemented. That's not accurate. If a state does not go forward under my 2013 legislation, the federal government steps in. Bottom line here, Jake, is the United States is the only major country on earth does not guarantee health care to all people, and yet we spend much, much more per capita on health care than do the people of other countries, and we still have 29 million people uninsured and many more underinsured. So yes, I will continue the vision of FDR, of Harry Truman. I believe health care is a right for all people. It will be politically difficult to achieve, but I will maintain that vision and fight for it. That's the goal I want to see.
And Hillary Clinton and her campaign keep going after you for it. In response, you tweeted a photograph this week of you and Hillary Clinton in 1993 in which she thanked you for your commitment to, quote, real access to health care for all Americans, unquote. Is this your way of suggesting that Clinton's attacks today, as opposed to back then, that today's attacks are phony and insincere?
Well, the reason that we did that is what Secretary Clinton understands, is that I have, throughout my political life, believed that all Americans are entitled to health care. And when her campaign attacks me as saying Sanders wants to dismember all of the health care plans that are out there, the ACA and the other plans, and leave millions of people uninsured, that is obviously not true. She has always done. I've known Hillary Clinton for 25 years. I have a lot of respect for her, but her campaign should not be suggesting that my ideas will leave millions of people without health insurance. In fact, the opposite is true. What I want to do is to make sure that every man, woman, and child in this country has health care. And I believe, Jake, we can do it in a much more cost-effective way than is currently the case. We are spending almost 3 times more than the British, 50% more than the French on health care per capita. They provide health care to all people. We can do a lot better.
So let's talk about this single...
So that's the last clip I want to show on the back and forth between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. I think Bernie Sanders got the best of that back and forth, and I'll be interested to see how he does in the Democratic debate, and I'll let you know what I think when I do my Democratic debate clip roundup based on the debate that's going on. And I want to move on to a couple clips on issues that you probably won't see at the debate for those of you who have stuck with me while I'm doing my clip roundup during the debate. This is a kind of tough question. I thought that Jake Tapper on CNN State of the Union asked Hillary Clinton on one of the 2 issues I said I have concerns about this is her foreign policy. One of the 2 issues I have concerns about, one being Wall Street, the other being hawkish foreign policy. This is about the hawkish foreign policy. How she actually was calling for new sanctions on Iran right around the time these prisoners were being released that I'll get to later in the program. Here's how Hillary Clinton reacted to this previously released Iranian prisoner, a hiker. I can't remember exactly when he was released. He said that what Hillary Clinton did, talking about new sanctions before these new prisoners being released had even left Iran, that it was, always raising tensions, and that's what he remembered about Hillary Clinton when he was a prisoner, always raising tensions. And you can see her response on CNN this morning here.
Against Iran for its ballistic missile program. That prompted a response from another American who was once held prisoner in Iran, Shane Bauer, one of the hikers released in 2011. He had some tough words for you on Twitter, writing, quote, "Seriously, why would Hillary call for more sanctions now? As far as we know, 4 of the Americans are still in Iran. Totally irresponsible," unquote. He also said whenever he was in Iran, whenever he heard your voice, his heart would sink because, quote, "all she ever does with Iran is inflame tensions." I want to give you a chance to respond.
Well, look, I appreciate what he went through when he was held prisoner in the infamous Iranian prison. And we were very happy that we were able to get him and the 2 other hikers back home. But we have a very clear path we are pursuing with Iran. I am pleased that we do have an agreement that is being implemented, and I was part of putting that in place by getting the sanctions imposed on Iran that the entire world went along with. But we also have made it clear from the beginning that their missile activity is still subject to sanction. That is part of the overall approach that the administration has taken toward Iran and that I support. So when we became aware of missile activity that is under UN supervision and is prohibited, it would be a mistake not to make clear to Iran that we are very, very happy to see us implementing the agreement to put a lid on the nuclear weapons program in the way that they have complied. But that doesn't mean they can now go off and invest and test a lot of missiles that would eventually be able to be intercontinental, that could reach the United States and maybe, carry a very dangerous weapon. So I think there might be a misunderstanding of what our whole agreement consists of, because certainly I've made clear I'm proud of the role that I played in getting that agreement in place. But as president, I will enforce it, and there have to be consequences if Iran veers away from what it has agreed to or what it has been mandated to do or prohibited from doing by the international community.
Let's turn to politics, obviously.
So that's Hillary Clinton shoring up her right flank there to make sure that when she goes up against a Republican, she can't be accused of being weak against Iran, but it doesn't give me any confidence that she's not going to be too hawkish and too interventionist, which is one of the reasons I lean more towards Bernie Sanders than Hillary Clinton. And having shown Hillary Clinton not give a very reassuring answer to a fairly tough question from Jake Tapper on CNN State of the Union, I want to show Bernie Sanders give a more reassuring answer to a somewhat tough question, although it goes back to the 1970s, which is, I don't know, that's 40 years ago. This the quote that George Stephanopoulos uses against Bernie Sanders in this question, but it basically shows that a long time ago, Bernie Sanders used to actually be a socialist. I've made comments many times about how he doesn't really believe in government ownership of the means of production anymore. Now he just believes in progressive taxation and a robust social safety net, and that's not actual, classic socialism. But back in the 70s, he was a real socialist, but he disavows that. Talking to George Stephanopoulos this morning here.
Secretary Clinton's campaign has also been making the point about electability. She seemed delighted by the fact that Karl Rove's campaign is now running an ad against her in Iowa. And you know that in a campaign, past positions are going to get scrutiny. So I wonder how you respond to some of the things that are circulating now about your past positions. Back when you were running for governor of Vermont as a Liberty Union Party candidate in the 70s and 80s, you urged congressmen to give serious thought to the nationalization of the oil industry. And then you went on, in the long run, Sanders said all utilities must go under public ownership and all necessities of life must be provided free for people.
Well, you know what, George, you know, that was a long, long time ago, before I ever was elected to anything. I was mayor of Burlington for 8 years. I've been in Congress for 25 years. You're right, they can go back. People can go back and look at the fact that Hillary Clinton, as I understand it, was a supporter of Barry Goldwater. Who cares? That was a long, long time ago.
Well, that's what I was going to ask is that
I have run.
What were you thinking then, and what changed your mind?
No, I don't. It's what I said 40 years ago is less important than you talk about electability. If you look at all of the polls, or almost all of the polls that are out there today, what you find is that Bernie Sanders defeats Donald Trump by a much larger margin than does Hillary Clinton. In the last national poll that I've seen, we beat Trump by 13 points. If you look at the battleground states like Iowa and New Hampshire, we beat him also by a whole lot more than Hillary Clinton. I think our appeal is to not only Democrats, not only to young people, not only to working class people, but to independents as well. So if you are concerned, or if the American people or Democrats are concerned about which candidate has the best opportunity to defeat right-wing Republicans, I think you're looking at them. It's Bernie Sanders.
Okay, and finally, just to be clear, so those positions, you completely disavow them?
You know, George, I have been an elected official for 25 years. Yes, those positions are what were before I even assumed any office. I have a record of 8 years as mayor of the city of Burlington, 16 years in the House, 9 years in the Senate. I'm very proud of that record. And anyone who wants to argue with me about that record, that's fine. You want to go back 40 or 50 years, that's fine. I don't think people give much credence to that.
Senator Sanders, thanks very much for your time this morning.
So, like I said, I think that was a good answer from Senator Bernie Sanders, but it also shows that he's not really a socialist anymore. He used to be a real socialist, believing in government ownership of the means of production, but he's evolved into what he calls a democratic socialist. But I've covered that issue several times before. I want to show another tough question that Hillary Clinton got. This one's from NBC's Meet the Press, where Chuck Todd shows some interviews they did with potential Democratic voters and what their concerns are about Hillary Clinton. And you can tell me if you think she gives a good answer to those concerns on NBC this morning here.
You know, to try to figure out why this race has gotten closer in Iowa, why your lead has shrunk in Iowa, we spoke to a number of voters. I want to play 3 sound bites from Iowa voters about some potential pause they have regarding your candidacy. I'm going to play it and get you to respond on the other side.
You get the impression from her that she believes maybe the rules don't apply to her, or the same rules don't apply to her that apply to everybody else.
She's worked really hard and done some amazing things. I just feel that Bernie Sanders is has a little bit more fire lit up in people.
Well, I hear people talking about questioning her honesty, and I don't necessarily do that, but I think that's one thing that people are kind of not sure, and they felt that way about Bill Clinton too. You know, and so I think some of that rubs off.
Madam Secretary, how do you answer that pause? It's just from Democrats, some pause that they have.
Well, first of all, Chuck, I always thought this was going to be close, and I can't speak for anybody else, but I've worked as hard as I can to build an organization in Iowa, to be out there listening and talking with Iowans as they move toward making the first-in-the-nation decision in the caucus on February 1st. And I've also been very consistent over the course of my public life. If I tell you I'm going to fight for something, I will do my very best to get results. And I think that's why I have such strong support. And I feel very good about where we are, but we're going to just keep working until the very last caucus is decided on February 1st.
You know, another problem you may be having.
So that was a better answer, but it didn't really address the concerns of some of those voters about honesty and some of the other things. It just said that she always expected the election to be close, and I mean, I don't know if she did or she didn't. Somehow I don't think she expected that Bernie Sanders was going to be as close as he is right now, and if he wins Iowa and New Hampshire, he may actually have a chance, and that's the subject of this next question, sort of. This is Jake Tapper over on CNN State of the Union. Wait, is this the right one? No, I'm sorry. This is John Dickerson over on CBS's Face the Nation, where he talked to Bernie Sanders about watching the State of the Union and wondering if he, when he watched it, actually pictured himself being president of the United States. And surprisingly, he did, as he explained here.
When you were at the State of the Union, did you think that might be maybe up there?
Actually, the thought did cross my mind, honestly. It did. And, you know, it's a very humbling experience, feeling. But, you know, we're running hard to win. We think we have a good chance in Iowa and New Hampshire. And we think we have a good chance to pull off what will amount to, I think you will agree, one of the great political upsets in modern history.
Did you just think about it and that's it, or did you start making plans?
Yeah, well, I was jotting down my inaugural speech, and no, not quite. It's a long way to go before we talk about inaugural speech, before we talk State of the Union speeches. Yeah.
You have suggested you are the more electable Democrat in a general election. What is it about you, Bernie Sanders, that makes you more electable?
I think we have an appeal to young people, to working class Republicans, to Democrats, obviously, to independents. I think what we are seeing in the Sanders campaign is a great deal of energy and excitement. It will translate into a large voter turnout. Large voter turnout not only means winning the presidency, it means recapturing the Senate, doing well in the House, winning governor's seats all over the country.
There's a perception that you have a weak...
So, it could happen. Bernie Sanders could be the more electable candidate, and he could get elected. I mean, it is not the most likely outcome of the election. Even being the Democratic nominee is not the most likely outcome. But like I said, if he wins Iowa and New Hampshire, and he's been ahead in New Hampshire for a long time, and they're pretty much tied in Iowa, and one reason that may be is this poll that is in the question that Chuck Todd asked Hillary Clinton, and this is the last clip I have of Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders. And here Chuck Todd asked Hillary Clinton about this poll that shows a plurality of the Iowa Democratic voters actually call themselves socialists over calling themselves capitalists. And I don't know, maybe Bernie Sanders calling himself a democratic socialist and kind of fudging you know, like I was saying before, classic socialism to, you know, just being a Democrat who believes in a robust social safety net and progressive taxation and single-payer health care, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that may be like a genius plan instead of just an, you know, a vagueness about socialism. And Hillary Clinton can't bend that far and call herself a socialist. She sticks with being a capitalist despite the poll results here.
You may be having in Iowa is that you don't ideologically fit. This was in the Des Moines Register poll this week. 43% of likely Democratic caucus goers identified as socialist. Only 38% of likely Democratic caucus goers identified themselves as a capitalist. You, in the last debate, said you were a capitalist. Bernie Sanders calls himself a Democratic socialist. If you don't win Iowa, do you think that's the reason?
Oh, I don't know how people take all this information, but, you know, I support a free market economy. I support the competitiveness that has created the, you know, greatest economic engine in the history of the world. What I am worried about is that it's not continuing to do what it used to do, which is to give the vast majority of Americans a chance to get ahead and stay ahead. That's why I've got a very vigorous jobs agenda. That's why I've put raising incomes at the center of my economic policy. And I think what I know will work is to get back to good old-fashioned job opportunities that will help people get ahead through manufacturing, through infrastructure, through clean energy, through the kinds of plans that I've been putting out. And look, when we have a Democrat in the White House, a Democrat, we do better economically. We saw that when my husband was president. We've watched President Obama dig us out of the huge ditch that Republican policies put us into. So I'm very confident that I know what will work if we have the right commitment as a nation, and that's what I want to do as president.
Let me ask you.
So I guess Hillary Clinton, like I said, would not bend so far to get the votes of Iowa caucus goers that she would fudge as to whether she was a capitalist or a socialist. Although I guess she didn't actually say she was a capitalist. She just said she was for free enterprise. But she certainly didn't say she was a socialist like Bernie Sanders has done. And maybe it will win him Iowa. That I guess we'll have to wait till February 1st to find that out. And before I leave the topic of the Democratic side of the 2016 presidential campaign, I'm going to show you something you're not going to see over the Democratic debate. So as a little reward to the 100 or so of my live viewers who've stuck with me during the live show despite the Democratic debate going on at the same time, this is former Vice President Al Gore, a ghost of Democrats past, I guess. He was over on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, and Bill Maher gave a very, I guess, obsequious interview. I don't know. I guess the real word is like ass-kissing interview. But you'll see from this part where he talked about how Al Gore was really ahead of his time on so many things, and then they have Bill Maher asked him a question about the Paris climate change agreement, and that's where I think Al Gore gives some, useful information beyond Bill Maher being obsequious over in this clip.
You know, you were ahead on so many things, not just climate change, which is the issue of our time, and you are the leading voice, but you were right about Social Security and the lockbox.
Yeah.
They wish they could use that phrase now. And you also were the person who did bring us the internet. And one reason why... It's true, but it's true. And I tell you something, not to go back, but one reason I was so mad at you in 2000 was because you didn't own that. When the Republicans made that a laugh line, you kind of like laughed along with them, which I thought was the wrong tack. And you were the one who did enable that. That wasn't around in 1979.
Well, on the legislative side, that's true. The scientists came up with all the ideas in engineering, of course. But some people stuck up for me. Newt Gingrich, of all people, came to my defense on that. Really and truly, I really appreciated that. But
well, he's a visionary.
Well, on that he
was. Remember, he wants to put the disabled on the moon. Okay, so let me ask you again about the climate thing. Because the big news this last year was Paris. There was a big conference in Paris in November. 190 nations signed on. President Obama said it was a turning point. The right wing poo-pooed it. Is it a turning point?
Yeah, I hope it is. The reason I qualify it only slightly is that it gives us the chance to really solve this crisis. It sends a very powerful signal to the investor community and businesses that the era of carbon-based fuels is coming to an end, and that they should take advantage of one of the most exciting events in the entire history of technology and business, which is not as well known as it should be, and that is that the cost of producing electricity with solar cells, solar photovoltaic cells, has now come down so far, so fast, that in many areas it's now cheaper than electricity from burning coal. And in many areas of the world, that's true. And the more we expand solar energy, the faster the price comes down. We're very close to the point where it's not going to be economical to burn fossil fuels for electricity anymore. Wind is also coming down in cost. So the Paris Agreement is almost certainly a turning point, because it's like the starting whistle. Let's get with the renewable energy. Investors should divest themselves of oil stocks and coal stocks, and particularly the dirty fuels like the tar sands, and start shifting over to renewable energy. Now, there are some naysayers who say, well, these provisions in the Paris Agreement are not all binding. Some of them actually are binding, the
But it's a
transparency
start.
agreements. It's a
to
start.
get 190
and
countries.
every nation in the world is on board with this now.
So that's Al Gore talking about why the climate agreement in Paris is a good deal. Like I said, I wanted to thank those of you who have stuck with me during my live broadcast. I saw one of the people ask this question. So in response to Supersonic Boy 2001, yes, sometimes I do reply to the people in the comment section, although it is kind of hard to keep up with it because I'm producing this whole program by myself, and I'm like running the software, and I'm doing some things while the clips are playing, and so I don't get a chance to read every comment, but I do save all the live comments and I post them over on a public Patreon page. And then I post that as my comment that is one of the top comments. So if you come back in like 12 hours, there'll be a link to a Patreon page where you can look at all the live comments. I always save those. So like I said, that Al Gore clip was the last clip on the Democratic topic of, he isn't running for president, but like I said, he was kind of the ghost of Democrats past. And next I want to show 3 clips on the Iran deal that was implemented. The Iran nuclear deal was implemented this weekend. That was announced. And then there was this prisoner/hostage swap between the United States and Iran, which I will discuss after you watch a report on it from Richard Engel on NBC's Meet the Press this morning over here.
It has been confirmed that the 5 American prisoners held by Iran have been freed, some of them, including the Washington Post reporter, leaving Tehran this morning. It was not exactly part of the nuclear deal, but the nuclear deal certainly opened up a dialogue that allowed for this prisoner release to happen. That nuclear deal was brokered and announced here in Vienna yesterday. It was an enormous breakthrough. This is what people are calling implementation day, as the terms of the agreement are starting to take effect. After Iran, it has been certified, lived up to its obligations, put checks in place to make it very difficult for Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. So what does Iran get from this deal? First of all, it gets access to international markets. It can bank. Iranians can move money into and out of the country. Iran can now sell oil legally. It unfreezes tens of billions of dollars. Effectively, an economy of 80 million people is now being welcomed back into the international community. Chuck?
Richard,
So that was the NBC Meet the Press report, and I thought it was a fairly factual report, and you'll see those same facts over on Fox News Sunday, their report from Catherine Herridge. But one thing they add in that report is they really stress the really cool things that Iran gets out of the deal, as I will discuss after you watch that here.
Is the culmination of 14 months of secret diplomacy, though the Secretary of State says the Americans' fate was never tied to a successful nuclear deal.
While the 2 tracks of negotiations were not directly related, and they were not, there is no question that the pace and the progress of the humanitarian talks accelerated in light of the relationships forged and the diplomatic channels unlocked over the course of the nuclear talks.
In addition to Washington Post reporter Jason Rezaian, who was arrested in 2014 and convicted of spying by a secret court, the freed Americans include Christian pastor Saeed Abedini, a U.S. Marine veteran Amir Hekmati, and Nasratollah Khosravi, though little is known about his case. After the news broke, Abedini's wife spoke cautiously about the family's relief.
It just seems surreal. It came at a time that I was not expecting, and it doesn't feel real until we see him, but I know it's real.
The prisoner exchange came just before economic sanctions on Iran were lifted under the terms of the nuclear deal struck last summer, freeing up tens of billions of dollars of frozen assets and opening global markets to Iran's massive oil and gas reserves. A congressional source briefed on the intelligence says Iran is still holding at least 3 Americans. Some of the names are not public, adding the regime has not turned the page on its use of hostages as bargaining chips. Chris.
Catherine, thank you.
So that was the Fox News coverage, and like I said, they really stressed the benefits that Iran got out of it. I wanted also to show a short clip from CNN's State of the Union that also covered this, because it was from a little later than any of these other programs. So it took place after President Obama made a statement, and so it includes a little of President Obama's statement. And it actually, this is the beginning of CNN's State of the Union, where he talks about, where Jake Tapper does his little thing where he says what the State of the Union was. And this week it's jam-packed because of so much happening over here.
Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is jam-packed. We're only 2 weeks and 1 day away from the Iowa caucuses. And on today's show, you will hear from the major players on both sides of the presidential race: Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump, all coming up. In just hours, the Democratic candidates will face each other down at their debate in Charleston, South Carolina. They have plenty of new material, with Clinton and Sanders both lobbing fresh lines of attack against the other this week. Meanwhile, breaking now, President Obama just spoke about the release of 5 American prisoners held in Iran. The men released as part of a swap with Iran include Washington Post journalist Jason Rezaian, Marine veteran Amir Hekmati, and Christian pastor Saeed Abedini. They are expected to spend a couple of days at a U.S. military hospital in Germany for medical evaluation before coming home to the United States. A 4th American was not on the plane. He decided to stay in Iran following his release. The president this morning heralding their release as a diplomatic success achieved in tandem with the Iranian nuclear deal, which took effect this weekend after the United Nations declared that Iran had dismantled large parts of its nuclear program.
Several Americans unjustly detained by Iran are finally coming home. In some cases, these Americans faced years of continued detention, and I've met with some of their families. I've seen their anguish, how they ache for their sons and husbands. I gave these families my word. I made a vow that we would do everything in our power to win the release of their loved ones, and we have been tireless.
Lots to talk about this morning. We're joined.
So that's the final clip on the Iran deal I wanted to show you. It's kind of a breaking story, and there wasn't a lot of coverage, but I wanted to show you what coverage there was. I cut out a lot of the questions and answers from the candidates. I didn't think they were all that informative. So if you want to go and see what Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump and Marco Rubio and possibly Ted Cruz, no, definitely Ted Cruz and Donald Trump actually said something right when it was breaking. So if you look down in the video description, you can find a link to all the full programs, and you can find those clips yourself. I didn't think it was that informative, but before I finish the program, I want to show one more clip from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. I guess it wouldn't be a Real Time with Bill Maher program if there wasn't something about Islamophobia, although I noticed Bill Maher never mentioned the word Islamophobia, and you may remember in previous broadcasts, he seems to have said Islamophobia doesn't exist, and I think that's pretty much been disproven by Donald Trump and the Republican candidates for president in 2016. And so Bill Maher doesn't really address that, but except near the end, he talks a little bit about how Donald Trump may win because he's really, playing on Americans' emotions on this Muslim issue. But mostly he talks about how, there's something wrong with Muslims because of these attacks on women from Syrian or maybe African refugees in the city of Cologne, Germany. But I don't think he does a really good job in arguing it, and I will explain why. Although he gets pretty much taken apart by his panel, including a fairly surprisingly good argument against what Bill Maher is saying from, I like to call demonic cherub, but he's like conservative Christian Ralph Reed, who was on the panel, HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher last Friday here.
I think with American thinking on both sides is that it's noble that he did not want a lot of security there because hi, I'm an American, I'm your friend. But insisting that people around the world who are not like us are going to be like us. This was Bush's mistake in Iraq, was it not? They want freedom. Well, freedom might not be on their top of their list of what they really want. And I think we saw this just recently in Cologne, Germany. You know, when all the Syrian refugees were going to Europe, I wasn't for it. And I think a lot of people are coming around to that position.
No, but I think you have to make a distinction, though, Brother Bill, between culture and morality. I think every culture has good and bad. Every culture has good morality and bad morality.
Not equally.
So that, for example, the mayor, as you know, of Cologne, she had been attacked with a knife in her neck. That was not a Muslim or refugee. That was just a gangster.
But we are not saying that there is no crime in the world except for Muslim crime.
Exactly. But I just want to make
that
clear.
But if people don't know what happened on New Year's Eve in Cologne, Germany, and a number of other cities in Europe,
that's right.
Some of these refugees, some of these Muslim men, and of course we're talking about men who come from very misogynistic cultures. Their cultures are not like ours.
But there's been Muslims in Germany for a long time.
But they're not the ones that committed. They're not the ones that committed the crimes against the women. The German
It's the brand new ones. But that's what I mean. So it's not just Muslims in and of itself. It's particular slices of.
Well, it's all of them that have just come in to. I mean, they were the new immigrants.
But I don't understand why liberals don't stand up for the liberal values.
I'm not a liberal. You know that I'm a revolutionary Christian, brother. I ain't got nothing to do with liberal. Other than their opposition to monarchs and their protection of rights and liberties, I love that. But it's just, I just want to make sure that you have a nuanced reading of the very rich Islamic tradition that has its gangsters and has its magnificent people.
Well, I think... But I don't care about the tradition as much as the present.
In the present, we got to keep track of the worst stuff.
This is the worst refugee crisis since World War II.
That's right.
We're talking about between 4 and 5 million Syrians who have been displaced. They're living in camps. They're being starved out by Assad, one of the most brutal dictators in the world. I have great compassion for these refugees who want the only thing
we all do. I agree.
We would want for our children, which is to be safe, to be secure, and to be able to survive.
That's right.
Here's the problem.
But they also like Sharia law.
What this is starting to look a lot like, Bill, is the Marti boat lift. It's starting to look like an offloading of a hooligan and a criminal element, and in some cases, terrorist sympathizers. And I think Angela Merkel taking 800,000 of these refugees without adequate vetting of who these people are is going to come back.
It's not a criminal element unless you are prepared to indict the entire society as criminals. There is polling on this. A great many Muslims around the world are for Sharia law. You know what is in Sharia law: cutting off the hands for thievery, putting women to death for adultery, killing people for leaving the religion. Women are not equal citizens.
That's true.
These are not criminal activities in a Muslim society. These are activities, okay? So the idea that when Syrian refugees come to European countries or to America, that they are going to completely fit in is a fantasy.
But beyond not fitting in, they committed crimes. They committed sexual assaults on hundreds of women.
Because in their society, and especially an infidel woman,
right?
That's an infidel woman.
But Bill, there's no evidence at all. There's no evidence at all that the thugs and the hooligans that were committing these kinds of crimes on New Year's Eve in Cologne, Germany, were devout Muslims. There's no evidence of that.
That is...
You really cannot indict all peace-loving Muslims who subscribe to that religion because of the bad actions.
I'm not indicting all of them. Absolutely not.
Well, you're
the
saying
problem is that you're indicting none of them.
No.
We want to indict people who engage in criminal activity.
Bill, that is not a fair characterization of what I said at all.
All right, I want to ask one more thing before we run out of time. Because it's
Can I just add quickly? That's why when Donald Trump suggested a ban on all Muslims, which I do not support, but that's why his poll numbers went up 12 points.
Yes, and you know what? He's a demagogue.
Of course it's wrong, but it got closer.
But you know what?
I agree, but it got closer to what people want.
This is the one issue the Democrats are going to lose the election on, because they have to choose between demagogue Donald Trump
that might keep us safe,
and Hillary and Obama, who won't even say Islamic terrorism.
Wow.
So he's saying that Donald Trump is a demagogue and a bigot. He used the word bigot there, but his views on Muslims aren't that far from Bill Maher's views. And I think that his argument about the attackers in the against these women in Cologne, Germany, he really seemed to want to blame it on more people than just those who were involved in the attacks, and that's the problem. He said, you just want to indict none of them, and no, the people he was arguing with there, they wanted to indict the people who actually engaged in the criminal activity. And as a demonic cherub Ralph Reed pointed out, you can't even be sure what whether these were devout Muslims, these refugees, they come from Muslim culture, a misogynist culture. That's probably true, but that has more to do with the culture than the religion, and I don't really want to go into that whole argument again, but I guess since Bill Maher brought it up in the broadcast, I wanted to make sure I showed that clip, and I appreciate all of you who joined me even during the Democratic debate. I'm going to finish up now and let you all get to that debate if you want to, and I will be watching the debate later, and based on the reaction I've already gotten from the live viewers, I guess I'll be doing a Democratic debate roundup probably sometime around 10 or 11 a.m. Pacific time if I can get it done. And I also just posted on Twitter a picture of Sandy guarding the door during the broadcast. You can see that at twitter.com/LiberalViewer. It's also on my Instagram account. I've been trying to use that Instagram account, so search for LiberalViewer on Instagram. If you're an Instagram user, you'll see that most recent picture of Sandy during the show. You may have heard her shaking her collar earlier, and I told her to sit down. So also, I appreciate all of you who've joined as patrons in this last week on my Patreon account. There's a link down to my Patreon account in the video description, or if you want to try to give me a direct donation through fan funding, there's a little eye if you put your mouse pointer right over here and you live in one of these special countries where you can do fan funding. Click there if you appreciate the time I spend picking out these 35 clips and organizing them and giving my commentary and giving coverage of the political campaign that's really starting to heat up, which it looks like I should be able to keep doing all the way through the 2016 campaign. I guess I'll be back in less than 24 hours giving you a Democratic debate clip roundup, assuming I can find some good clips, but of course there will be good clips, and you'll forgive me if I pretty much totally ignore Martin O'Malley. Maybe I'll find one good clip from him, but well, we'll see what happens. And I guess I'll be seeing you sometime in the next 24 hours, and also next Sunday around the same time, around 5 o'clock or so, 5 or 6 p.m. Pacific time. Every Sunday, I'm trying to do it every Sunday on a regular basis throughout this campaign, and until I'm back broadcasting to you all, I guess I'll see you all around the internet. Okay, Sandy, we're done. We're done, Sandy.